Hey everyone, I'm Zach,
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy.
and for this video assignment, we chose plant circadian rhythm as our topic. In this presentation, we'll go over the developmental process itself, the biological significance of the process, and we'll go more in depth into the mechanistics of this process. So, what's a human's circadian rhythm? In knowing this, you may be able to better understand our photosynthetic friends process a bit more. Circadian rhythm in humans, it's the name that of your internal clock that your body follows. Like, you wake up 5 minutes before your alarm. That's your internal clock knowing when to wake you up. It also affects several other bodily processes like your hormones, digestion, body temperature. It's like you have a tiny conductor in your body telling it what to do. And your body sets your circadian rhythm naturally and it's guided by your brain. But outside factors like light can affect the rhythm too. So, like when you're up at night and you're looking at your screen, you have trouble falling asleep, your brain stops producing melatonin, makes it hard to sleep.
So plants obviously don't have a human brain to help develop and regulate this process, but they do have a circadian rhythm that's similar to ours on pretty much the same 24 period hour block. Yeah, so just as humans have an internal body clock that regulates our sleep to wake cycles, plants also possess their own version of the circadian rhythm. This rhythm in plants plays a vital role in coordinating various biological processes, some that we learned in class, such as growth, photosynthesis, flowering, and many others. These rhythms are driven by internal molecular mechanisms that interact with external environmental cues, not limited to, but examples such as temperature or light. And these plants heavily rely on these rhythms to synchronize their physiological processes to maximize their survivability and their potential in the world, just like us.
Yeah, so the circadian rhythm in plants has far-reaching effects on the physiology and behavior, as and stuff we learned in class, processes like leaf movement, stem elongation, and root growth. It regulates the timing of photosynthesis, hormone production, and nutrient uptake. Very important, especially on the topic of photosynthesis. Additionally, the clock governs flowering time, ensuring plants flower at the optimal time for pollination and reproduction. Also, very important, you don't want to be pollinating during the winter when it's raining and all of your pollen gets, flooded to the ground and doesn't go anywhere. Plant circadian rhythms allow them to adapt and respond to environmental changes. For instance, the most basic one, plants can anticipate the onset of daylight and adjust their metabolism accordingly. They can also fine tune their responses to environmental stresses, such as drought or temperature fluctuations based on the time of day.
Yeah, so in this slide, we'll go into a little bit about the different biological processes that these circadian rhythms affect. As in photosynthesis, it helps coordinate stomatal opening and closing, which optimizes CO2 intake and O2 release. This also reduces water loss, and the circadian rhythms help signal stomata to open in the anticipation of sunlight. Next, we have germination. Circadian rhythms help regulate hormones that control seed dormancy, which in turn cues germination when conditions are optimal, allowing for the best survivability. Next, for seedling growth, once again, these internal clocks influence growth hormones such as auxin and gibberellins. They are regulated to peak at favorable conditions to once again maximize their survivability and potential. During the daylight, they're cued to prioritize leaf expansion and chlorophyll production. And at night, they're cued to prioritize stem elongation. And lastly, we have leaf movement. Once again, circadian rhythms help control water and ion movements in these cells, which allows these leaves to adjust their angles. This movement helps fine-tune the leaf towards predicted light to maximize photosynthesis. They can also trigger leaf fold or dropping to minimize water loss at night.
And yeah, now that we've explored the biological significances of the circadian rhythms, we're going to go deeper into this process at a mechanistic level where we can see how and where all this incredible regulation occurs.
Circadian clocks are cell autonomous, and each cell maintains its own 24-hour rhythm, which allows multicellular organisms to maintain tissue and organ-specific clocks, meaning there's not one clock that rules them all. The main components of a circadian system are the input signals from the environment that reset the clock, the central oscillator. This maintains roughly a 24-hour rhythm, even in the absence of input signals and the output signals that generate daily rhythms in physiology. In plants, this oscillator is a complex gene regulatory network of repressors and activators that form a multiple interlocking feedback loop. This is a highly simplified representation of the plant network to our right. Similar genes operating at similar times during the day in a similar manner are grouped together in white circles, excuse me. And just like we learned in class, the arrows represent activators and the blocked off lines represent repressors in this diagram.
Yeah, so the levels of these proteins that are produced through these genes are in constant flux. They each peak at a specific time of the day, and they all feedback to regulate each other's expression. The morning express transcription factors CCA1, the circadian clock associated, and LHY, the late elongated hypocodal, which you can see on the left of the diagram on the lighter side during the dawn, which are more active, repress the afternoon expressed pseudo response regulators, the PRRs, which include 1, 5, 7, and 9. And TOC1 is just another name for PRR1. And TOC1, along with the other PRR proteins, in turn repress the expression of CCA1 and LHY when afternoon turns to dusk, which closes this first feedback loop. L3, or the early flowering gene, L4, and LUX, the LUX rhythmo gene, these three genes are expressed at night. And when these genes are expressed, the evening complex feeds back and it represses all of the morning and afternoon expressed genes you can see in the diagram. It's a very complex, very regulated, and very processed mechanism.
The circadian network in plants is not only comprised of negative feedback loops. The RVE genes or Revel genes, RV4, RVE6, and RVE8 activate expression of several clock genes, including TOC1, the PRRs that we previously mentioned, and the evening complexes ELF3, ELF4, and LUX, ELF standing for early flowering genes. To activate gene expression, RVE8 forms a complex of LNK1, LNK standing for night, light, inducible, and clock regulated genes, and LNK2, and associates with the promoters of TOC1 and PRR5. The RVE activator proteins are not simply a second layer of regulation on top of the core circadian clock, but are connected and embedded into the clock regulatory network. It has been previously shown that RVE8 expression is repressed by TOC1 and the PRRs, forming yet another negative feedback loop in this network.
So this is a more complicated look at this circadian rhythm mechanism. CCA1 and LHY are induced by light. They trigger the genes managed by the clock that is expressed fast in the daytime, whereas suppressing genes are expressed in the nighttime. You know, you don't want to be doing photosynthesis during the night when you don't exactly have the energy to do it. This is a sample chart of these genes that we just went over. As you can see, the CCA1 genes and LHY, they prep for photosynthesis and stomata opening in the dawn. From the morning to afternoon, the PRRs go into sugar metabolism and energy storage during the evening. The ELF genes, the early flowering genes, the LUX genes, and the TOC1 genes help the plant grow, break down starch, and prepare for the nighttime. And then once again in the night, TOC1 and ABA signaling is active. This is where you see root growth, water conservation, and the clock resets to do it all again in the morning. And that is our presentation on circadian rhythms. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you for listening, everyone.